The man who invented the parking meter was tried for manslaughter. Carl Magee arrived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in 1919 not as a criminal. He was a journalist and lawyer who bought a local newspaper and began using it to make life difficult for powerful people. In New Mexico, in the 1920s, that was not a safe occupation. New Mexico's first senator, Albert Fall, was a longtime friend of the political machine that controlled the state. When Fall was appointed Secretary of the Interior by President Harding, Magee started noticing something odd. Fall's personal wealth was growing fast. He wrote about it, then testified before the Senate. His testimony on November 30th, 1923, cracked open what became known as the Teapot Dome Scandal, the largest bribery case in American history at the time. Albert Fall became the first cabinet secretary in American history to be sent to prison. The political machine Magee had fought did not forget. A judge who had become his enemy found Magee sitting in a hotel lobby in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and attacked him from behind. Magee hit the floor, reached for his .25 caliber automatic, and fired 3 times. One bullet struck the judge in the arm. Another entered the throat of a young highway engineer named John Lasseter, who had run over to help. Lasseter died at the scene. Magee was charged with murder. The charge was reduced to manslaughter, then he was acquitted. After that, he moved to Oklahoma City to start a new newspaper. And this is where the story most people know begins, though the real story had already started much earlier. Think about what it would mean to drive into any American city in 1920. No standardized road signs, no consistent lane markings, and, most relevant to this story, no rule about how long you could leave your car in front of any store, on any street, for as long as you liked. The result was entirely predictable. Office workers arrived early, claimed the best spots in the downtown core, and left their cars there all day. Customers who came later found nowhere to stop. Merchants lost business. The congestion didn't ease. It compounded year after year with no mechanism to fix it, because there was no mechanism to fix anything. Cities tried different solutions. Los Angeles, on April 10, 1920, did something drastic. They banned all parking in the central business district during working hours. No exceptions. No compromise. The public reaction was so fierce, including car parades flooding through downtown LA in protest, that the ban was lifted before the month was out. The more common solution, police officers marked tires with chalk, then walked their beats, checking whether the same tire was still in the same spot 2 hours later. Entire shifts, just for that. And it was easy to beat anyway. Move your car a few feet before the time was up, and the clock reset. Nothing worked. By 1930, the state of Oklahoma had gone from 3,000 registered vehicles to 500,000, a number that had grown so fast the roads simply could not absorb it. Someone had to invent something better. In 1932, the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce formed a committee to solve the parking problem. They made Carl Magee its chairman. An odd choice given everything. But Magee had a habit of approaching problems from angles no one else had considered. He didn't ask how to remove cars that were already parked. He didn't ask how to create more parking space. He asked something different. How do you make the person who is already parked feel the pressure to leave on their own? The answer was time. Not time enforced by a police officer walking a beat, but time displayed directly in front of every driver, counting down, impossible to ignore. A small machine bolted to a pole at the curb, accepting a coin, and in return granting a window of time before a fine. Magee commissioned 2 professors from what is now Oklahoma State University, Holger George Thusen and Gerald Hale, to build a working prototype. They called it the Black Maria. For manufacturing, they turned to the McNick Company in Tulsa, a company that ordinarily built timing devices used to detonate nitroglycerin in oil wells. The device that started the parking revolution was built by the same people who made explosives. In early May 1935, the first working model went on public display. Debate broke out immediately. Some called it progress. Others called it something quite different. That morning, 175 meters were installed along 14 blocks of downtown Oklahoma City. The rate, a nickel an hour. The fine, if you forgot to feed it, $20, roughly $400 in today's money. Drivers who arrived found something that had never existed anywhere on Earth before. A small pole at the curb with a clock face on it, claiming ownership over the time their car spent on a public street. The reaction was not warm. Some drivers called it an unconstitutional new tax, taking money from someone without due process simply for owning a car. A few filed lawsuits. Others were more direct. They cut meters off their poles with hacksaws. Some hired teenagers to move their cars a few inches every couple of hours to avoid the fine. Some parked deliberately straddling the line between two spaces, blocking both as a form of protest. Nobody talks about this part, that the world's first parking meter was greeted with organized sabotage. A month later, in August, the first parking ticket in history was issued. The recipient was the Reverend C.H. North of Oklahoma City, who had stopped briefly to run into a store and get change for the meter. When he returned, the ticket was waiting. He took his case to court. The judge dismissed it, but the meters stayed. Here is the part most people get wrong about parking meters. On the first day of installation, meters were placed on only one side of the street, not both. The merchants on the unmetered side immediately began complaining, not because they opposed the meters, but because they wanted meters in front of their own stores. They had watched what happened on the metered side: turnover. Customers arrived, parked for an hour, went in to shop, and left. Then new customers arrived, then more. Instead of one office worker's car blocking a prime spot for 8 hours, the space was serving 6 or 7 different customers in the same period. Before the end of 1935, nearly 300 additional meters were installed in Oklahoma City. Not because the government forced it, because the merchants requested it. This is the most counterintuitive fact in the entire history of the parking meter. The device designed to control drivers turned out to be most profitable for the stores. Within months, revenue from the meters and fines was already covering the cost of the entire program. Every dollar the city invested returned itself in increased sales tax receipts. By the early 1940s, more than 140,000 parking meters lined streets across the United States. North Dakota was the only exception. Sometime in the 1940s, a wheat farmer named Howard Henry from West Hope, North Dakota, received a parking ticket in the city of Minot. He was furious. Henry concluded that parking meters were mechanical bandits, unnecessary in a wide-open state with plenty of space and not enough people to fill it. He launched a one-man campaign, gathered signatures, spoke in town after town, and in 1948, he succeeded. North Dakota became the only state in America to ban parking meters on all public streets. When the state legislature repealed the ban in 1951, Henry led a citizen referendum that reversed the decision. The ban survived court challenges. It held for nearly 70 years, maintained in part by loyalty to the legacy of one man who refused to pay one ticket. That number sounds abstract until you do the math. 70 years of no parking meters, sustained by a single farmer's anger and his granddaughter's determination to honor it. This is not a fable. It is documented history, proof that one sufficiently angry person can alter public policy for generations. But the North Dakota story also contains a deeper question. Was the hostility to parking meters a reaction to the device itself, or to something more fundamental? The answer, it turns out, is both. A parking meter is not just a tool for managing vehicles. It is a philosophical statement about public space. Before 1935, the street was common property in the most literal sense. Anyone could use it, for any amount of time, without paying. When a city installed a meter at the curb, It was effectively declaring that public space has a measurable economic value, and that the time you spend occupying it can be sold. This is what the opponents in 1935 were actually angry about, not the nickel, not the $20 fine. The principle that something which had always been free now had a price. That argument never fully resolved. Every time a city raises its parking rates, every time an automated system mails a fine to someone's home without human interaction, every time someone gets a ticket 5 minutes after the meter expires, the same anger resurfaces. Not because people misunderstand the rules, but because something still feels wrong about the idea that pausing briefly on a public street is something you must pay for. Carl Magee was not thinking about philosophy when he hired 2 professors to build the Black Maria. He just wanted people to stop blocking his customers' parking spots. But he accidentally stumbled into one of the most unresolved questions in modern urban life. In 1960, New York City formed its first parking enforcement unit. All women. They were called meter maids, a name that outlasted the policy by decades. The spring wound mechanical meter survived largely unchanged for decades. Then came digital meters, then meters that accepted credit cards, then meters connected to smartphone apps, letting you add time from inside a restaurant without walking back to your car. Each iteration made the system more efficient. Each one also generated a new wave of complaints, because every new version eliminated one more excuse people had used to avoid paying. The protests that happened in Oklahoma City in 1935 and the meter sabotage that happens today are fundamentally the same frustration in different clothes. Someone who believes that the time they spend stopped on a street should not be the government's business. Carl Magee, the man who was tried for murder and acquitted, who brought down a cabinet secretary with a newspaper article, who built a billion-dollar industry from the problem of where to park a car, died on January 31, 1946, 10 years after Parkometer number 1 was installed. He did not become wealthy from his invention. Today, there are more than 8 million parking meters in the world. The United States alone collects more than $3 billion per year in parking fees and fines. Every day, millions of people stand at a curb, tap a screen, insert a card, or open an app to purchase permission to stop temporarily on a public street. Most of them do not think about the fact that this is a very recent arrangement in the history of cities, an arrangement that came from a troubled journalist in Oklahoma City who had no other way to keep himself alive except to move somewhere new and start over. The most universally disliked routine in urban life, checking the meter before walking into a restaurant, counting the minutes, calculating whether you have enough time, traces back to a man who invented it while trying to prove he was not a murderer. The next time you stand at a parking meter and pay for 12 more minutes, remember one thing. The small mechanism that charges you for the right to stop was built by the same factory that made timing devices for oil well explosives. Cities have never changed much in how they find their solutions.